Hi and welcome back to my channel. This is Quest for Faith with Brian, and here on this channel we try to break down the Catholic faith from a newcomer's perspective. So today I have a special guest on, and this is Colin from Catholicism with Colin, and he's a young guy that just started a new YouTube channel. He hasn't been on for too long, so definitely go. I'll have the links in the description below to go check out his channel. So give him some love, go and subscribe. But Colin, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So let's kind of, I know that you, and I'll have a link to the article that you helped write too on, what was that syndication or that group?
Christ Life.
Christ Life. So I have a link to that article in the description below too. But let's kind of talk about, so what was your, I mean, I know you're 16, and I think that's why it's important to interview you. But what was your faith journey before Catholicism? Like, what did that look like before you discovered Christ?
Right. So I was an atheist ever since I was very young. And when I say like very young, I mean like when I was in third grade, I was talking to Christians on the bus, like, I don't think God is real. Like, God forgive me. But yeah, like I was like talking to a guy who I know is Catholic now and everything. But yeah, like I was like, I don't believe in God. I think it's just a thing people made up to control society or whatever atheist nonsense or whatever. I was never really raised with any religion, so that atheism just kind of like dwelled up in my mind. And that's really how I was until I was, 13 years old. It was the beginning of the, COVID-19 pandemic right there in March. And I was like, I was listening to a political podcast, a right-wing guy who was a Christian. He was like, he made the argument for God of objective morality that, if essentially you were teleported to a world where Nazi Germany had won World War II and they were doing awful things, killing people, all sorts of atrocities, then would they be right? And he'd be like, no. Well, what an atheist believes is essentially a society is what determines what's right and wrong, moral relativism, that sort of thing. Well, if that's the case, then how can you say that that's wrong? And then just like, oh wait, that doesn't compute. That's just an excuse for atrocities, really, to justify one's own moral evil behavior. And I realized that's what I had really been doing with everything. Like, oh, it feels good, I'll do it. I was hurting other people, treating other people like really badly, and so I did it. And then I realized, like, and then he made the point, like, okay, if humans don't determine morality, who does? Somebody higher than humanity has to determine who's, who makes the rules. And, I was like, well, it could only be God, or at least some form of God, as I believed at the time. So I was like, wow, not an atheist anymore.
Yeah, I think the atheist argument's an interesting one to me because even if you're a scientist, right? You see that there's laws of nature. You see that there's certain predictable outcomes when just in science and nature and mathematics, like something put it in motion. And so even the I think what did I read? Like it's 1 to the power of 4 times 40 to the power of 10 is the probability of life actually happening on Earth. Right. Yeah. That's a 40 plus 40 more zeros percentage points, like, of chances of life happening on Earth, right? Or 40 zeros, then 40%, like 0.40 zeros, then, right? So you're telling me that the idea of you believe that more than the idea that, hey, maybe there's somebody out there or something out there that actually created and designed the world we live in, or the universe we live in, because of all of these laws of natures and how scientific models work and everything. So I always find it kind of interesting because when I start thinking and breaking it down that much, I'm like, the probability of us having life on Earth is like if I took my car apart and threw it up in the air, like completely apart, threw it all the way up in the air, and then my car lands and it's put together perfectly.
Exactly.
Like, you believe that? Like, that's crazy. So,
no, and they say it requires too much faith to believe in God. I mean, that
takes a lot of faith to do that.
Right, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not at all probable by math or science or anything. And that's another argument I've heard, which is like, you know, order never comes out of chaos. Order can only result of other order. Like if you throw a grenade in a pile of dirt, a whole universe isn't going to spawn out of that dirt. Nor if you have a huge explosion in the middle of no space, is a bunch of, molecules going to come together and form all of life as we know it and consciousness. Like, it really doesn't make any sense.
And the fact that it was a Catholic priest that came up with the Big Bang Theory.
And it was, yeah, exactly. Who also believed that God's the one who created the explosion and guided it together.
Yeah. I love how science just keeps confirming the Bible. But
exactly.
So you were an atheist and you realized, man, there's something else out there.
Yeah.
What led you? Because I feel like your age, it'd be real easy to go to a Bible church and just listen to rock music, rock worship music, and raise your hands up, feel good and happy. What led you to look into the Catholic Church?
Right. Well, before I went to the Catholic Church, I was not a Protestant, but I was like, so it's crazy the way that God kind of puts things in our lives. We had it's called like a little library. It's like a little box you put outside your house. People can come bring books or whatever. So my mom had people donate different books to our house. One of them was a picture Bible. Now, it was a Catholic one. We had a nice German family who was Catholics and everything. They came and delivered it, and I had a bunch of them stacked in my room just for storage. Now, one of them was the picture Bible. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a read. And, it happened to be a Catholic one. So I went through that.
Was it the Action Bible?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
I did have an Action Bible. It wasn't that one. It was a different one with illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like it was meant for little kids.
Yeah.
Little kids.
I got a few of those.
What?
I have a few of those in my house. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was reading that. I'm like, this is for kids. This is crazy. And I was like, from Genesis, all the way to the end. And it doesn't really. It's not like a word book. It's just kind of the story by story, the process of salvation. And I'm like, this is the least sophisticated of Catholic material. This is crazy to me. But yeah, so that whole thing about becoming Christian, and I kind of had that moment that night that I was like, I'm gonna become I'm not gonna be an atheist anymore. The guy was Christian. My grandfather is a Christian. That's just kind of and we're in America. It's a majority Christian country. It's like, I might as well start here to look here. And I could have fallen into other things. I probably could have. My dad is a Buddhist, matter of fact, and there's a ton of other ways, rabbit holes I could have fallen down. But I happen to look towards Christianity and just the idea of Jesus Christ saving us, through his, on the cross, an actual personal God, who instead of men having to achieve God to go up to, to the Lord, he comes down to us out of his love for us and drags us out of the mud. That resonated with me. Yeah.
That's salvation's history, right? I mean, it's Christianity's the only faith that God comes to us and meets us on an even playing field and says, all right, I'm going to do the work, and now open up the gates of heaven to allow you to be able to be saved. And now you have to, do what I'm asking you to do. But yeah, to me, that's such a compelling story. And I think for me growing up in a Christian home, I didn't think much about it. But the more I hear other atheists talk about it, and it just makes sense that it's so compelling that, wow, somebody loved me enough to actually die for me. That's amazing. So you started going, okay, I think I'm going to be Christian. And then you're looking around and there's 40,000 Protestant denominations you can go to. You can go to Orthodox. You can go to become a Catholic.
Yeah.
How did you weave that?
So, okay, I had been reading the Bible. It said it was a Catholic Bible. I was like, okay, Catholic, it's on the table. Thankfully, because I didn't have strict Protestant parents or anything like that, nobody had ever implanted the anti-Catholic seed inside of me. So that I was at least open to it, that was on the possibilities. And when I kind of saw, like Protestants, the way they kind of do their like worship, praise and worship. I'm not against it. I do it in some cases, like at certain church, group gatherings or whatever. But I think that it has a place, and actual liturgy and prayer has a place. And I was just kind of like, is this really the highest way of worshiping God? It's just clapping your hands, doing a fun little song with a guitar. Is this like the essence of, is this really what we were created for? Is this like what, like, is this like going to point up to all of God in heaven? Like, it didn't seem to cut it for me. I was like, this is kind of whack. I don't know. I don't like it, so I was kind of turned off by that to Protestants, but I did, I ended up going to a Protestant church with my grandfather. It was an Episcopal church, which is like, off of Anglican. Mm-hmm. So it was, it's like on like that tier, kind of like with Methodists, Anglicans.
Mainline.
Like, yeah. So kind of like, like we have a little bit of tradition, but we're not Catholic. We're not the whole deal like Catholic or Orthodox in that sense. So, and during that time I was like wild because like I may have mentioned, COVID had just started. Yep. And so since that happened, now I have a bunch of time. I have plenty of time at home. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch some YouTube videos. I happened to fall upon Ascension Presents, Father Mike Schmitz and everything. And so I really watched like I think every single YouTube video on the channel, like all of it. I absorbed all of it. Like I watched so much. Then I got into Pints of Aquinas, and I saw Scott Hahn's interview on there, and it was just so much like in there. And I was like, I knew a lot about Catholics, and it was like the way that they talked, like
it's different.
It's different than the way Protestants kind of talk of like, oh, well, this is my opinion on things. The Catholic Church is not afraid to make objective claims about things, and that was attractive to me. And so I remember the night before I went over to the Protestant church, like for their service or whatever, I had watched a Father Mike Schmitz video on the Eucharist, the real presence of the Eucharist. I'm like, this is literally it. And I was like, wait a minute. He's Catholic, and he's saying that this is what it is. What do the Protestants have? What is this then? So I asked my grandfather, I was like, what about, what could I do? Am I allowed to not receive? And he's like, yeah, you can do the X and everything, which we have as well. But there's no reason for them never to do it because they don't really believe in mortal sin. Like, they don't believe in that. So they would never do that anyway.
And it's still symbolic.
Right. So, and I went there. I was like, okay, Lord, if this is really your body and blood, I trust you're going to reveal it to me. Even though I'm clearly in a state of mortal sin, I'm going to do it. And, because, and I wouldn't do that in a Catholic church, but I was like, all right, well, we'll see what happens. I was still on the fence about it. I went there. I received, the Eucharist. It's not it. It's not the same. I can look back now. Not the same at all. There's no grace attached to it. It really is just, bread and wine, which is not the case with, in the Catholic Church under consecration at all. So I was like, yeah, Protestantism, that's no go. I'm not doing that. No Protestant. So I was like, all right, I need to go to the Catholic Church, except, wait a minute, it's COVID. All the churches are shut down. What am I going to do? That was the worst thing, I think, because of COVID. It's like stopped me from pursuing God in that case. Like,
what state are you in?
What?
What state are you in?
Maryland.
So
okay. A little bit pretty blue in my area, so they had a lot of lockdowns.
Yep.
So anyway, so it was around January of 2021. And so, like, this is like, kind of into COVID. Things are kind of like, lightening up. Get a little loose. So I called, like, I literally looked on my phone. I looked up Catholic churches nearby. And I went to Google Maps, saw, oh, here's one over here, which is my current parish. And so I was like, okay, it's like, it's a 5-minute drive. So I asked my mom, hey, Mom, can you drive me to a Catholic church so I can go and talk to this priest? So I had called and arranged a meeting with a priest. And so there's this older priest who's not there anymore, but he gave me a talk. He gave me this cool book. It was a good book. It was like this guy who was Protestant who became a Catholic. And so,
do you remember the name of it?
I think it was called Becoming Catholic.
Yeah. Okay. I've read that book.
Read that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. So it was a good book, though. Like, it goes over a lot of different theological concepts, like, sacred tradition, that thing. So I read that, except I don't think he understood. I was I was already committed. I wanted to become Catholic desperately. I was like, this is what I was created for. This isn't just like a little side hustle. This is everything. And so I was, I was given a book to read. I went back to him, and he was like, listen, you need to get a profession of faith. You need to receive the first Eucharist, confirmation. He was like, wrote me a note of all the things I needed to receive. And I was like, wait, but how do I get them? And he was like, you gotta come back. I'm going to be retiring in June. New priest will be set for me. So he kind of was like, okay, I'm already leaving. Good luck with the next few.
That's
yeah,
a Vatican II priest. But I've heard of other people having that experience when they go to a priest and they're like, yeah, what about this Catholic Church thing? I want to join and blah, blah, blah. And they go, okay, here's a book. Like, no, dude, okay, let me get you in contact with our RCIA person that leads RCIA. And then that's what should happen. So I'm hoping that second priest did that in June.
Man, yeah, it's horrible because it kind of feels almost like they don't really want you there, which that's a horrible thing because because God obviously does, and I knew that, and I had mortal sin, mostly pornography on my mind. I become addicted to that very little. It's like most people, 90, actually almost everybody I know, apart from a couple of sheltered away Catholics, have been exposed to that.
Good for their parents.
Right, really good parents. Like I told some of my friends' parents, like you guys did a great job protecting your kids from that stuff. So I had been addicted to that, and I had fallen into other sins, and it's just like I had all this weighing on me, and I was like, how am I going to escape? So I gave I went and I was like, okay, it's August now, so I had met the priest who was there in April. So 2 months later, I call up the church again. They're now been changing leadership all around, like in the parish. And so the woman answers. She's like, okay, there's a religious brother coming tomorrow. Call me tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'll get you a meeting with this new religious brother. So I was like, okay. So I go there and I meet a man named Brother Kevin. Hey, if you're watching. So, Brother Kevin, they're a part of an order called the Trinitarian Order. Have you heard of them before?
Yeah.
Yeah, the red and the blue cross and everything. Wonderful people. But yeah, so he had come from, he's studying to be a priest. He's going to be ordained this coming summer. And so he was like, yeah, I'm going to get you an RCIA. So he started up an RCIA, and it was me and a woman whose fiance was Catholic, but she was Protestant, and she really wanted to become, Catholic and everything. So that's what happened. Yeah, no, and she's wonderful. They're having their first child soon. And so, I was in RCIA, and kind of like you, I had already kind of known most of the things before we had even started. Like I was like, oh well, I already knew this. I already saw the Father Mike Schmidt's video about it. But so I already knew most of the stuff. But it was good to at least be able to talk about things and really it was just a great experience to meet actual good Catholics. And, the receiving of the sacraments, I didn't have to be baptized because I had already been baptized in the Trinity before when I was a little tiny baby. But
yeah, so yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you about the confession story. How was that? And maybe go into, because I feel like being Catholic and having to confess the same sins is awful. Yeah, that's where the Catholic guilt comes in. So touch on your first confession experience, and then just how important is that to your daily life now?
Yeah, so my first confession, I was really, really, really worried, because I was I had the sin that had been on my heart for all these years, and I was like, I just want it to go away. I just want forgiveness. I just want God's literal forgiveness. And so, that's what I need. I was like, finally, today's the day. So it was after Mass. The priest had, arranged for another priest who's visiting to hear our first confession. And so I was the first one. It was me and the other woman at RCIA. I went first because she's like, oh, you're the brave one. You can go first. And I was like, okay. So I went in there, and I did the thing that you do where I sit right in front of them, face to face, that kind of thing. And I was kind of expecting, I don't know, I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was. But I confessed my sins, and then he was like, your sins are forgiven. He gave me a card, said the act of contrition, and then I left the confessional, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's all gone. All these sins, all that guilt, like I felt like I was finally free, and I was. Like, I felt Jesus' mercy right there, and I was just like, yes, this is what I've needed for so long, and I finally had it. My heart is free. I'm free of sin. So that's really like, what happened with my first confession, but it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, confession is just great. I love it, and it's one of my it's one of those my favorite sacrament. Well, not my favorite, but it's up there, right? Like, I mean, it's one of those things that you kind of, it's God holding you accountable, right? Especially if you're doing a really good examination of consciousness and looking at your life and like, okay, where have I messed up? And what I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this, it's like you start realizing, oh wait, maybe that is a sin that I've been doing and I haven't been thinking of it that way because I've been doing it for so long. It's just a habit. And your life starts improving in other ways that you weren't even worried about before. Right.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely, when I was reading doing my first examination of conscience, I was like, yep, check on a lot of things. But, it's freeing, really, though. And I remember I had a paper with all my sins I had written on it, so I wouldn't miss any of them, of course. And afterwards, I crumpled up, ripped it to shreds, destroyed it. And
no one needs to see this. I just confessed that.
I mean, it's gone off of your soul. No reason for it to remain on paper. So.
Yeah. No, and I think verbally, so Protestants, I know if anyone's Protestant watching this, you're like, you can just say a prayer to Jesus. Right. I want you guys to look into the Bible where it talks about confession in James, and it talks about it in Matthew, and it talks about it in various other places about the sacrament of confession. Confessing your sins, when we go to confession, we're confessing our sins to God, right? We're not confessing our sins just to this priest. And the priest is there to guide us, to give us advice, and to help us on our faith journey. And I just, confessing your sins to another human being is so much more difficult and holds you more accountable, right? Like, I hate when I have to confess the same sin every now and I've gotten better, but there was a long period of time where it was like, yeah, I did this again. I have to confess this. It's been, and it's like I typically go maybe 2 times a month, but every now and then when I'm going every week, it's like, I know it's only been a week, but I just think it's a beautiful sacrament. So you got through RCIA, went through your first confession, then you didn't have to be baptized, so you went through the whole confirmation process, and you finally did you join an Easter Vigil in 2022, this last year?
Yeah, so this year, it wasn't the Easter Vigil, it was before that, it was in February, because the bishop was going to do it himself, but he could only visit at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, but it was around, that time. They had the whole confirmation group, which I was separate from, because since it was just me and the other person at RCIA, so it was weird because I had met them once on a confirmation retreat, but they had their whole other class going on, and I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm here too. So, cool. Confirmation happened. Although before I want to go into that, I would like to go into the Eucharist, which I had received a few months prior on Christ the King, which is coming up, so it's going to be my 1-year anniversary of receiving our Lord for the first time. But yeah, that was amazing. I remember I went up, and our priest, at the time and still in our parish, they do not allow us to receive both species of the Eucharist,
Yeah, we just do the...
Yeah. So do you guys do that at your parish, or?
Yeah, we just do the host. And our parish actually still has the kneelers, and everyone does it on the tongue still, so, which is awesome. That's nice.
We didn't do that ours, but we don't have altar rails anymore at ours. But anyway, so he wanted us since that was our first time, he wanted it to be the real deal. So he had us right after consecration. Everybody, was still kneeling and everything. We went up to the altar right there, and we were like the first ones to receive, and it was, under both species. And so, I was just like, I went first, and it was like, body, Christ and everything, and it was like, it was amazing. I received on the tongue for my first time. I've kind of been prohibited by a lot of people, like a lot of priests, from doing that now, because things can, around our parish, things can be a little, there's a culture, kind of like, people look at you funny, the stress is a little bit much. I only do it with one or two priests I receive on the tongue, but with some of them, they've asked me not to do it, so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it it's not a sin not to.
Yeah, I agree. The church allows it, but I don't want my hands touching the consecrated host, right? Like, it's more that respect. I'm not a priest. I don't need to touch it. So just put it on my tongue and let's go. But it is allowed by the church. So if it's allowed, it's allowed. And I've been to those parishes where they, like, my first parish, they actually would say, if you want to receive it on the tongue, please be last in line. And this was after COVID, right? So we were coming back. And so they would wait until they were the last ones, and then they would let them receive on the tongue. And then they'd, because he would have to hand sanitize in between every time, which I'm like, you probably don't need to do that.
Because one time I got hand sanitizer in my mouth.
Like, and then do they bless the hand sanitizer, right? Like, shouldn't they bless it? They should. Right. Like, you're touching the hand sanitizer is touching Jesus. Like, you probably should. I don't know. I've never asked that question. The thought went in my head though.
I don't know. I don't know how the blessed hand sanitizer would work.
I'm just saying, like, it's Christ's body, and anything that touches it, like, anyways, that's probably nitpicky, just a little bit, but
yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, because I think for me the Eucharist is just like, anyone that says that, well, I just didn't get anything out of that, leaves the Catholic Church, and it's like, I didn't get anything from the service. I'm like, Christ isn't enough for you? Are you kidding me? Like, you literally get Christ.
Right. Yeah.
So you got to take the Eucharist, which was amazing, and is always.
When I was like, oh my gosh, it's finally happened. When I remember back when I was in the Protestant church, it was like the same feeling leading up, but it wasn't the same feeling coming out. But this was like whole other ballpark. Different. It's different. It's so different. It's life-changingly different. I was like, I'm never going back after this. Never could. It's so good. It's so beautiful. It's amazing.
So I want to shift a little bit here. So, because I think one of the things that I think where the Catholic Church has been failing in general is catechizing young people.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, I think a lot of this really actually is on the parents. I think that you can't just expect, oh, well, they went to Catholic school, so are they, they went to, why am I going blank on it? What they call it? Anyway, it's like, they go through all the classes and do all that stuff, and it's like, that's not enough. But for you, and I know that as a young man, and you're talking with other people about Catholicism, what do you think is is one or two suggestions that if people are talking to younger people about our faith in the Catholic Church, where do you think that we can have a better impact on young Catholics?
Right. Well, unfortunately, a lot of younger Catholics who are being raised in the faith have a disconnect between their own personal relationship with Jesus. It's like the problem is that they think that religion is just the thing that their parents are showing them. It's just like a thing that they have to do. They gotta get dragged to church every week, or their parents are gonna get mad at them and ground them or whatever. And that's kind of like that's the belief. They don't realize how they don't realize what they're being given by their parents. And I've seen that a lot with a lot of people who are falling away, and they really like don't have the personal relationship with Jesus, which is the foundation of our faith. Like, that's what I think like the main disconnect is between them and the church is like they have the aching for God in their heart. They don't think that God's the answer. They think that God is the thing that their parents think are the answer.
Or it's getting in the way.
Right, yeah, that it's getting in the way. And so, unfortunately, a lot of parents, they kind of let social media, TikTok, things like that, like, which is social media, but yeah, like, they let social media, they let the internet, they let the TV educate their kids, and that kind of, like, puts different ideas of, what's important, what provides happiness, and they'll think, at best, they'll think, marriage and relationships. At worst, they'll think drugs and money and also just like
promiscuity,
like,
porn,
right,
all that stuff.
Right. That is the antithesis of being a human being. Like that is like the end of, like goodness. But we know the real end of goodness is God. And that's my main problem when it comes to evangelizing people my age is that people, they have the aching in their hearts. They have the desire. They have the Grand Canyon-sized,
hole,
heart
Christ-shaped hole.
Right, exactly. The God-shaped hole. And instead of filling it with the river of God's love, they're just throwing pebbles into it, expecting it to become full. And it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, and I think I feel... For me, being a father, like I'm on a daily basis talking to my kids about something with my faith. Like it's not being Catholic and being a Christian isn't a thing I do. It is who I am. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a different mindset. And I think it should dictate everything you do in life. And I think the struggle we're having is that we're not conveying this message correctly in a way that young people are receiving it right. And I think that's just a struggle. And it's interesting for me with young men like yourself, and you see with like the traditional Latin Mass parishes, like the average medium age in a lot of those parishes are like 26, 27. Like they're these young families that are dying for this, for the fullness of Christ. And I think, and tell me if you think I'm off on this, but I think it's being different from the world is what's going to draw more people to us. When we try to act like a Protestant church and have a great band instead of maybe doing sacred music, I feel like that's a bigger draw because we're different, and people notice the difference there. What do you think?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I mean, that's kind of one of the things that turned me off from the Protestants was just like, they're just trying to like, basically, they're making God entertainment. And I despise that, really. And I find it like, it's like when I was an atheist, I was looking for an authentic, real, transcendent experience that brought me to God. Like, when I was ready to become a religious person, a good Christian. And the Protestants were, it seemed to me like the majority of them are just, like, oh, hey, let's get together on Sunday, eat a bunch of food, and have like family and, or not like community as a community activity, which is good. Community is something, and I think the Catholic Church does need to work more on that, having more social events. That's something Protestants get right. That's definitely one of the things, having a coffee hour or whatever. That's
small
a good
groups
thing.
Or things like that. Yeah.
Small group, yeah. But there also needs to be time for liturgy, and what I was looking for was ultimately the Mass. So, like with the Latin Mass, like that's an extraordinary form of that. I think that's probably like the most ornate you're going to get, and everything, right? Like there's that in the Novus Ordo. And I definitely, that definitely is true. Like the young adult groups, which I was kind of exiled from some of them because I'm the only person to ever be have to leave because I'm too young. But I like spent some time with them, just kind of like, oh well, I'm new to the faith, see what things are going to be like for me in like 2 years when I'm 18. But so yeah, a lot of them go to Latin masses, and they have like different groups of Latin mass for sure. And I do see a lot more boomers going to the Novus Ordo churches and everything. It's sad because all the young people are leaving, and you're not going to bring them back with guitars. You're going to bring them back by reigniting their relationship with Jesus Christ. That desire. That's what it really needs to be. I mean, catechism, you can tell them the whole catechism, and they do in Catholic schools. Like at least a significant portion of it, and they do teach that. But the problem is that a lot of these people who are like, they're told all these things, it's just another subject. It's just like, oh, blah blah blah, we're not going to use this in real life like other subjects or whatever.
Yeah, and they're not connecting it to living out your faith.
Right.
It's like you have the knowledge, but then you're not seeing people live their faith. And I think, and for me, I think that's where we can, as Catholics, we can bridge that gap, is if we're visibly living our faith. It's not that we're perfect. It's not that we're all trying to go through the process of sanctification, and we all fall and we all have our issues.
Yes.
But it's being different. I don't want, like my 8-year-old's been complaining about, no one else, like he's got gluten and dairy allergies, and he's complaining that he's different than others. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to be like other people. If I'm like the world, I'm failing. And I've told them that. I'm like, we don't want to be like the world. We want to be different, and it's okay to be different. And people are going to notice when you're different. And I think that's where Catholics need to be. And I feel like that's what spread Christianity throughout the world, was that Catholics were different than the Romans. They were different than the Gauls when they went to France. They were different than the Spaniards when they went to Spain. And because of the way they were living and acting in their faith, and they were different, is what drew people into Christ. And
well, they have a different message of that of the world, and that's something that, it's so weird in my pursuits of evangelization at my school. The difficult thing is that we are in fact like preaching a kingdom that is not of this world, but because of the bad influences of the church and like Protestants and at some extent Catholics as well, like they've kind of made it seem like it's just another aspect of life, not the purpose of life itself.
Yep, I agree.
Like it's become too ingrained into our society as a not important thing.
Yeah. What, you don't talk about religion and politics? I'm like, no, you need to talk about religion all the time. So, yeah. But anyways, I think that's it for me on this. And I think I really do appreciate you coming on my channel and letting me interview you. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? Like, I'll put a link to your channel and that article and everything in the description below. But where else can they find you?
So you can find me on my YouTube channel, Catholicism with Colin, at Catholicism with Colin. And yeah, so I hope you check out my videos. Thank you so much for having me on, Brian.
No problem. This was awesome, man. And more I can encourage young Catholics to be vocal about their faith, the more I'm going to try, man, because it's needed in this world today. So thank you very much.
Thanks.